Deus Ex is regarded as the best PC game of all time. I imagine most people don't even know this game due to its age, but once upon a time it was unavoidable. Every game journalist called it a 10 out of 10. All the memes around and forum discussion of people's personal experiences with the game. A decade later we got Deus Ex Human Revolution, which was many people's introduction to the series, including myself. Human Revolution is a horror can of worms, but in between the release of these two games, there was Deus Ex Invisible War. Invisible War was for the longest time regarded as one of the worst games ever made. The funny thing is, I never heard a proper justification for it. When Hero Revolution was released, I was still a child, and I saw a lot of people talking about Invisible War and how awful it is, but no one ever explained why it was a bad game. The most I've seen is that the game is horribly broken and unstable, which on its own shouldn't be enough to hate a game so much. Pathologic is just that, but it's a cult classic. Since no one really revisits this game, or even played it in the first place, I'll do the hard work of looking back at it, analyzing why people hated it, why they're wrong, and what does this game actually accomplish in both its own merits and as the sequel to Deus Ex. A big deal with Deus Ex is that outside the PC it didn't work as well. The maps were too large to work, and the gameplay too niche to sell to a console audience. With the sequel, they plan to simplify the game to fit the original Xbox. People hated that idea, and it's very apparent considering every review can't fail to mention that. I'm here to defend that decision. Simplification is a dangerous game. Some games simplify it in a way that's great, for example Mass Effect 2. It kept everything great about the original, but it was simpler, easier to understand, and was welcoming to both old and new players. Most games, however, don't. For example, Fallout 4, which boiled the dialogue too far down to the point it shoots itself in the foot at times and removes a lot of player freedom and creativity which 1 and New Vegas offered, all for the sake of being simpler for a wider audience. In the end, Deus Ex is a very complex game. If you analyze each component, they're not all that good. Take skills for example. To gain experience points, you need to complete goals, things like completing quests or finding secret areas and etc. The inherent problem with this is that you can never really level your character to the max. If you're playing without prior research, you won't know what skills to invest in or what actions will grant the most points. By the end of the game, you're either a balanced character who's okay at everything, or specialized in certain things and horrible at everything else. However, when it connects to the other parts of the game, it all works. Can't level up something you desperately need? Don't worry, something else you're professional at will be your solution. You're not good at anything? You just need to spend more of the resources you've been hogging the whole game. It sounds like a joke, but investing in swimming ends up being one of the most resourceful skills in the game. In the end, this is what defines RPG games, the consequence of your investments. The complications of making a sequel is not only how do you make these components work again, but improve upon it. It's an insane amount of work. If you just repeat what worked, your game gets called lazy and uncreative. If you try shaking things up with fresh new ideas, your game gets harassed for being different. Invisible War went with the latter, and didn't bother keeping things from Deus Ex. Skills? Gone. It still offers the same experience with the consequence of your investments, but it does so with the different mechanics that work just as well, like the weapon mods and the augmentations. It has less augmentations, but they still offer very interesting ways to play. First off, you can switch between augmentations if you have a canister. In Deus Ex, once you get an augmentation, it's there to stay, which it's part of its charm. But also means if you haven't already decided what you want your character to be, or if the augmentation you picked doesn't work like you expected, you'll have to deal with it. This gives the player flexibility with their augmentations that Deus Ex hadn't offered. Switching augmentations come with a heavy cost, bringing whatever you had before to level 0, meaning that if you keep switching to whatever situation demands, you keep wasting more and more resources. Not to mention that now there's illegal biomods, which require specific biocanisters that can only be acquired from certain groups. By the end of my playthrough, I only had enough to fully level up 2 augmentations if I wanted to change. Hacking is now an augmentation, making it a bigger consequence if you become a hacker, especially since you have to give up on cloaking from leaving enemies if you pick it. A major complaint was the ammo system. Like any other game, Deus Ex had ammo. You can find it scattered around pretty much everywhere, however the inherent problem with ammo is, when can I use my best guns? A very common way of playing RPGs like this is to hoard your ammo or best healing items and unleash them on the final boss. The problem is, it leads to a lot of moments throughout the game that aren't fun to deal with. It's supposed to be a reward for dealing with all these troubles you faced while saving these resources, but it causes the whole game to become a slog, which Deus Ex suffered from. Invisible War has universal ammo, meaning all weapons share the same ammo stash. Early in the game you can get the Mag Rail, one of the strongest weapons in the game. You're so worried about not wasting ammo throughout the game that you don't stop to realize you could be wiping the floor with this. Hey look, now you barely have any ammo. This is better since it still keeps the challenge of running out of ammo and having to use it sparingly, but you're not avoiding using it because you're afraid of not having it later on for a final boss. If you run out of ammo, it's your own fault for being greedy and using the powerful weapons non-stop. Usually enemies drop barely any ammo, meaning if you spend a mag rail, you won't regain that ammo so easily. Instead of dealing with scarcity of resources and finding ammo you need, you're supposed to have better awareness of your resource spending and know better when to use your powerful weapons, since no matter what, you will refuel your ammo for all your weapons. Exploration is improved by this. In Deus Ex, when you come across a gap rocket, that might be a problem. What do you do with 20 gap rockets when you use a sniper rifle? It creates a stupid problem that you're carrying around all this ammo for weapons you don't even use. In Invisible War, however, when you find a partially depleted ammo clip laying around, it feels rewarding. Whether you shot them to death with a mag ray or burned away all your ammo with flamethrower, or if you're being silently taken down with pistols and sniper rifles, it's a reward for exploration no matter what, because it will immediately be useful to you regardless of your build. That's gotta be at least one shot. The big complaint about the game is how small the maps are, and how many loading screens there are, which, yeah, I can see how frequent loading screens were a problem when the game was released. The current world record speedrun of the game has some 5 minutes of loading screens. This is a problem that has died out with time. It is a bit bothersome to see a loading screen so often, but at least they're very quick. However, people's real complaint is how small the world feels in comparison to the original. The thing is that Deus Ex's maps were incredibly small. It was designed properly to fit all it needed to fit in. Mankind Divided is a good example of a massive map that is big for the sake of being big. In Prague, there are only a handful of side quests with objectives very far apart from each other, there's barely anything to find scattered around, and the people around just mouth at you about their meaningless existence. In Deus Ex, it was relatively small, but it had lots of content. The side quests were engaging and interesting, there's plenty of good items to find around, and a lot of good storytelling about the current state of the world. People remember being big not because of its size, but because of how much content it had. Invisible War's world is just as small, just divided into separate maps. If you were to merge them all into one map, it will be of equal size. It has plenty of content. Basically, an NPC either has a side quest related to them or unique dialogue. Plenty of loot around, and trust me, with that ammo count you need what you can get. And more importantly, lots of storytelling to go around. The only reason people are mad about it is because they see a loading screen, and that breaks the immersion. A big thing people love about RPGs is making choices. New Vegas is the best example, with the abundance of choice it gives you, not only the main story, but all the side quests. Some may tell you this is a form of player agency, when in reality it's just dialogue choices masqueraded as player agency. The game is directly asking you for your input on something, and will react in a scripted way, and more often than not, as Fall 4 will show you, that's the extent of what you can do. The only player agency the entire game gives you is whether you shoot the father's head off or not. Everything else is settled with dialogue. Something people may not realize about Deus Ex is that it's a game without any dialogue choices. Sure, you get choices, but they're mainly there to either continue the dialogue, leave, or be rude. JC is always speaking for himself, and very rarely you ever get to pick your own lines. Now, dialogue choice-based games aren't bad or anything, that isn't the point. In fact, New Vegas and Mass Effect are wholeheartedly dialogue choice-based games, but are some of the best games ever made. What Deus Ex really did was mask away a linear story with agency, where you did in gameplay decided everything. You could basically kill anyone, no matter how important they are. You're always free to make your own choices in gameplay that not only affects the game state, but the story as well. Deus Ex still puts that into full blast. In fact, all dialogue choices in this game are chops or to accept a quest. Alex is always speaking for themselves, and the player has absolute freedom in gameplay and how they deal with the situation. A big deal breaker for me in Deus Ex was that you can't kill a very tight handful of characters, because they're the ones that tell you the ending choices, and if they die then you can't really get that ending choice, and it will lead to a lot of rewriting. It was a big immersion breaker, shooting a gap rocket at an Illuminati leader I don't trust and the fellas ain't bothered by it. In Deus Ex 2, every leader knows they're in danger in your presence. The only times they appear are behind glass or on the radio at a safe distance from you. Everyone else? Fuck them. The leader of the Order? Kill her on the spot. Think the Omars are creepy? Annihilate them! It all comes out to a close with the final objective of the game, which, to get some of the endings, you have to kill the other factions. Not through a dialogue choice that will have them killed, not through a long and boring quest, but by letting you personally choose how to blow them all straight up to hell. Now, this is player freedom. A big complaint about Deus Ex that people had was that the endings were picked by what you do in the final mission, rather than your choices throughout the game. Deus Ex 2 also does this. I'll always defend this design choice, as a major problem with games that make the ending fully depend on your choices throughout the game is that you never know what will affect the ending and what won't. Mass Effect 2 did this well. The only way to get the ending where everyone dies is by being a complete cunt to all your friends and constantly ignoring their needs, plus never upgrading your ship to a dangerous mission. And the game very much lets you know that maybe you should care for your friends and have your ship prepared. Metro 2033 is a great example of how not to do this. The game requires you to play in a specific way and interact with minor background things in order to get the best ending. By the time you realize it, you're already at the end of the game. Being given a choice at the very end and ignoring all of your previous choices is an even worse design, like Mass Effect 3, which requires you to meet requirements throughout the game, and it boils down to 4 choices. While the design of Deus Ex 1 and 2 allows players to really get invested in all factions without the chance of missing the one you wanted because you didn't play that one guitar in the beginning of the game that is completely missed, but now 9 hours into the game and I find out I had no choice but to commit genocide because I didn't know the guitar in the background mattered to the ending of the fucking game. The 90s was a decade full of changes for humanity. Countries were becoming independent, the economy was improving worldwide, and culture was being formed anew. Deus Ex acts a lot. Why don't I write the most complicated sentences possible? Deus Ex asks a lot of what should be done with this new world we found ourselves in going forward. Would it be best if we allow an all-powerful AI to stalk all we do for the sake of protection? Would it be best if the Illuminati came to power and kept the world on the rail of capitalism and a corrupt democracy? Would it be best to put technology to an end and bring the world to a dark age and build everything from the ground up and try to learn from our past? Or would it be best to entrust everything to yourself and be the leading head of all humanity and force your will upon them? He asked very important questions of the current world of 2000, and many of its scariest predictions came true. Deus Ex 2 follows up on these questions of change and human progress, but in a much more out there way. All the factions seek to change the status quo. The Illuminati wants to enforce a more powerful regime that cannot be challenged, which will provide security and economically balanced world, but one that will never change its capitalistic and controlling nature. JC wants to bring humanity into its next evolutionary step, bringing all humans together as one hive mind being. It will free us of war, social inequality, and economic crisis, but we will lose all of our unique features as individuals and human culture as a whole. The Templars want to eradicate the world of modern technology and return to old days when there were no technological superpowers like JC Denton or the Illuminati. It would solve war, but it will be a crusade, costing the lives of people and extraterrestrial life. Or maybe it will be best to let the world run its course. Humanity has lived a long life and left its legacy, and maybe it will be best to let it die, and let the next civilization learn from our mistakes. The game is very clear with its theme, even so more than the original. The original was a lot more focused on the conspiracies of the 90s, and the course of capitalism and corporate control really is the best for us. Invisible War does touch on these subjects, but it discusses the far more important theme of human progress. Everyone has an idea of how humanity should progress, and none of them are wrong. Changing the world is a very grey act. Even the Templars, costing the lives of millions for their cause, has an understandable goal. The Omars are the embodiment of human progress. They've evolved so much through augmentations that they aren't even human anymore. They're the next step of human evolution, in its most natural progress. Not by a superpower like JC deciding for us, but by humanity deciding and taking action on a problem. The problem being that the world will no longer be able to sustain human life, and we should prepare for that green future. Changing the status quo is difficult. Unlike video games, we don't have powerful people that want to change the world in any way that would help humanity. We live in a society that refuses to accommodate change and incentivizes acceptance of the norm and consumerism. These games inspire us to change the world in our ways. Protests and social movements don't just spread out of nowhere. Everything around us tells us it's wrong to challenge the powers that be, but media like this is what we need to provoke our critical thinking to desire change and evolve from desire to action. It's a beautiful and well-written piece about morality and change that I can't express enough how well done it is, and not to count how funny it can be. Alex D is just so full of personality, it's great.
Straight and narrow path, which is ever eroded by the human lust for transcendence.
I love it when you talk dirty.
Pause. Let me see your finger.
Go to hell.
Me? You never heard the name Leo Jankowski in Chicago?
Sorry.
I'm the one with the perfect special ops rating. They didn't tell you this? Why would they keep it a secret?
Ever heard the name Alex D? They told me the same thing.
What?
All part of SSC duties. I can't comment except to say the situation will be under control shortly.
What do you mean, no comment? I saw a man die.
Something I'll forever praise this game for is that it is at maximum 8 hours long. I was never a fan of games being incredibly long. To me, more hours does not mean better or even more content. Everyone praised Deus Ex for the Statue of Liberty, Hong Kong, Hell's Kitchen and all. Who out there rile up when thinking about the Declare Manor or Paris?
Are you happy to be in Paris?
We.
By the 18-hour mark, Deus Ex definitely had gotten a bit stale. By the time I was in France, I was just rushing to the end game already. It gets overwhelming, especially how slow these parts are. Fable 3 is only sometimes an outstanding story about morality and how evil can actually be the morally better choice. Well, most of the game is dumb quests with awful comedy and not fun gameplay. A lot of RPG games love questioning morality. Some of them are awful, like Fallout 3 just asking if killing is bad. Some of them are like Fallout 4, which asks if racism is bad. New Vegas has a good morality. Every faction has such wildly different morals that none can be argued to be the morally good one. And it's naive to attempt to do so. Morality is a cloudy thing. It's all gray, no blacks or whites. It all depends on your position, society, culture, and situation. With how Invisible War handles morality, everyone is morally neutral. The aliens are the best example we would discuss prior. Growing up with RPGs like Mass Effect, a thing that became a big deal is that before in-game, not just me, but basically everyone that I have ever met that is into this kind of game, looks up online the requirements for the good ending. If you look up the best aim for, let's say, Mass Effect 3, you get a plethora of articles telling you what you need to be a goody two-shoe in the game. If you Google the exact same thing with New Vegas, you get discussion forums of which do you personally think is the best. I love Mass Effect, but it depicts its morality horribly. It literally shows you what's the good choice and what's the bad choice. This makes the writing feel very off, since you're supposed to consider that maybe the villain has a point, but the good choice says they don't, and the bad choice makes everyone hate you. This leads players to only ever play as the good guys rather than what they think is right. People only stop to realize that Saren, the antagonist, has a point in retrospect, not during dialogue, which is when they should have their realization. This is why games like Fall and Deus Ex are so popular, because it made people think. People were so overwhelmed by changes in the gameplay that they forgot what actually made Deus Ex have its legendary status. Deus Ex was not just a groundbreaking RPG with unique gameplay, it was also a thought-provoking story about human evolution. Invisible War is a great RPG with unique gameplay, but it also was a thought-provoking story about human evolution. Deus Ex 2 Invisible War is a far better game than people will lead you to believe. It isn't better than the original Deus Ex, but it's a genius game that deserves just as much respect. Seems like all the critiques are just gamer bias. People were too excited for the next Deus Ex, and no matter what they had done, it would be a disappointment for fans at the time. When Human Revolution came out, it was so common to see people openly shit on the game, how it's one of the worst ever, For over a decade, I avoided playing it, fearing it was a horrible game, but it ended up being one of the best experiences I have ever played. If you're a fan of Deus Ex, or just RPGs and story-driven games in general, I can't express enough how much I recommend Deus Ex 2 alongside Deus Ex. Don't let people complaining online about it stop you from enjoying this amazing game, or any game that people are so negative about. There's a lot of great games out there people are so negative about, that when you just get around to playing, you start seeing the value in them that are so ignored. Some are like Pathologic, that even though people can't bring themselves to play it, they still recognize the values and creativity. Others are like Twilight Princess, which is highly respected and beloved nowadays, but was hated on release due to things that in the end didn't really matter, as the game still have a lot of values and an amazing story. This also applies to the other side. Just because people praise a game, that doesn't mean it's amazing. Skyrim and Persona 5 are my favorite examples of highly praised games that don't live up to their reputation, and their predecessors are actually superior in quality and artistic value. In the end, everything is up to what you personally think about these games and your experiences with them. And Deus Ex Invisible War is an amazing experience that more people need to try out.